Okay, one more day down, and the last video now has thousands of comments, and the new video I did is already over 600 again. We're going to have to do things a little bit differently here. I'll try to be a bit more discerning, and basically I'm going to take all the questions now from the newest video, and then that's going to happen again on the next Q&A. For those out of the loop, I got to play Path of Fire already, and I know a lot about it, but I don't know exactly what's what and what I've told you all. So we're doing Q&As. You can ask me anything you like about my experience of the expansion, and hopefully through that you'll learn a lot more about the upcoming demo that's beginning, not on the coming up weekend, but the one after. I'm going to try and do as many of these Q&As as possible, and over time, hopefully, we'll learn a thing or two. So on the previous Q&A as well, someone asked about whether the new expansion would give us Revenant or not, and how that would work with Renegade. And I speculated as to the answer to that. My speculation was correct, but I wanted to point out to people there is a big Q&A that the devs have got up now, listing out explicitly what comes with what product. I've mentioned a few times in recent videos that the business model that they've gone with is not quite what a lot of us expected, and it leads to a lot of interesting design things, like we can never have any more story in the jungle, for example, because, or perhaps even upcoming current events. There's loads of interesting things with masteries and how that stuff's going to be split out. For example, did you guys know you will not get scribing with POF, and you will not be able to claim the new hall in POF unless you also simultaneously have Heart of Thorns? Like, those interesting crossovers I definitely want to get into. They'll probably appear in a dedicated video, and I'll stop doing questions like that on these Q&As. Or the Hunter asks, so, any idea what kind of mount skills are shared between each mount once you unlocked their share mount skill mastery? Actually, I'm not entirely sure. I think basically what will happen in the demo here, guys, is we're going to get the Raptor, and you get to see all of the Raptor masteries, which I've already talked about in the post-show, and we'll get into more on the mount-specific video. But the other mounts, I think they're going to obscure, and we're not going to quite see what those masteries are. We're not going to be able to unlock those just yet. So the other shared abilities, I'm not too sure about. I think that whole sharing thing is a really interesting topic as well, by the way, as is an interesting thought of, okay, you can unlock all the mounts only once, and then on your new characters, you instantly get all of them, because at the end of the day, this is the mastery system. So that idea of taming and bonding with your mount companion will only ever happen once. The next question is from Axby1922, and it's more on a question we asked before, but I do have some more to say on it. So he says, WP, something you can do next time you get invited to a media event you get to record at is just move the mouse really quickly, like a sub 2-minute thing. As seen from Reddit, others will pause and cut and screenshot it all for you. So even if you don't want to read through everything and waste time doing it, just having it pop open on screen for a second will be enough. Ultimately, it's up to you. Now, yes, I understand that, and believe me, next time I do an event like this, if I get that opportunity, that is the kind of thing I will do. But I realized yesterday on the last Q&A there are two other big points I didn't touch on with this. Everything I said before still stands about being a fan, about wanting to have discussions with devs and being distracted by all of that, being uncertain of the time that I even had left, and so on and so on and so on. But one key thing, probably the biggest reason in total as to why you saw not just myself but a few people were kind of shoddy with this, was we actually didn't know exactly what ArenaNet themselves would release. And this turned out to be wrong of me, but my default impression or assumption would be that they would want to reveal the elite specializations themselves. Not in such a crazy capacity as they did with Heart of Thorns, where every single one got an entire week, but somewhere along there they would do on their own platform, showing us all of the skills, showing us all of the traits, and getting that information out, because that's such a big part of the expansion. The thought that the reveal would go basically the way it did, which is that all that pressure was on our shoulders, was not something I ever really anticipated. If I had known that, then my god, you know, that would have been 100% #1 priority. But I didn't, and if anything, it seemed like a big waste of time. For what it's worth, if you guys want to see really good mousing over and stuff like that, Bog's done excellent versions of that because he went for it, and well, it's paid off big time. So there's lots on his channel. Oh yeah, and the other thing I would say is it was more than 3 YouTubers in that room. This was a media event, and there are many more places you guys could have got this information from. I wouldn't chew out the few people that gave you something, when the truth is there are many more out there who gave you nothing at all on this topic. Anyway, enough of my crappy excuses. We'll do better next time. Let's move on to more expansion discussion. John says, silly question here, but since mounts will be a thing on the next patch, do you think that Orion will be our mount in the future? I actually don't think that this is a silly question. I totally think this is the kind of thing that they will do, because what you guys have to understand is that, yes, the mounts we've got are all hooked into the mastery system and so on, but mounts represent a new capability in the engine. And what that means is we could totally have a story step, just like when we were chasing after the egg, for example, in Auric Basin, and we got those super-powered gliding skills. We could, in a very specific glider, we can totally have a story step in POF where they put us on Orion and we charge around on Orion. In fact, I'm anticipating that to happen for something like Orion, but maybe a bigger adolescent Orion. Maybe not even POF itself, maybe in Season 4, but I'm definitely expecting that to happen with, for example, the Janundu, who we know will be around those regions of the Crystal Desert, and the devs will probably take the gloves off and go mental with. They won't be like full-on mounts that we get everywhere, but at specific story beats, sure, they're gonna have to do this kind of thing, right? And beyond that, you know, think about some of the fractals that turn you into Char or turn you into Asura. There could be fractals that put you on mounts now, and they're not technically mounts that require you to have Path of Fire, but they do use that mounting technology and so on that's now in the game. Lots of fun things that they can do there, and I don't think that's absurd whatsoever. Adam asks, how do you like the environment in POF so far? Yeah, I've been really astounded by it. I've really enjoyed it. Obviously, most of my experience was running around in the fringes of the city, and a lot of that is just kind of like open desert and traditional fantasy desert, which is fine as an introduction. What I loved about the Crystal Desert in GW1, though, was the variety in the landscapes, particularly places like the Salt Flats, and particularly seeing the Marganite wrecked ships out in the dunes and so forth. That's the kind of stuff that I'm really looking out for. I think the POF has surprised me in some nice ways. You know those pyramids that we saw? They ended up working out really, really well when you actually see them in engine, and they get me very curious about the lore of the region in the most recent 250 years, so I think that's awesome. As for the city itself, which I never got to experience too much of, Peachy has some amazing footage of the Amnoon Oasis, and all the little details that the devs got into those aspects of the environment I think is brilliant. Then there's that big trailer that they did on the official announcement showing off the snowy areas in the expansion and some other stuff, areas of the brand that we'll be able to return to. I've wanted good high-level brand content for ages, and this expansion is set to give it to us. This expansion and the season following it looks like it's going to take us some amazing places. It looks like they've done the Crystal Desert justice, honestly. Next question is from Golga, who says, hey WP, I really like your videos, but what do you think about the power creep? I went to Bogotta and he has a video about the Hollowsmith, and the numbers are at this moment insane. A Tempest is a pathetic joke in comparison from the raw damage that he can pull off. 1,700 damage on the last hit of an auto attack chain. That's close to the same damage as 100 blades. We don't the really damage strong modifiers, but right now it's just crazy. Alright, so yeah, listen, I think that my view on the power creep is this. New elite specializations are more than welcome to be stronger than core specializations, because every build will always run 2 core ones anyway. But new elite specializations should be on par with current elite specializations. And so what you described just there, I think will be a problem if it remains forever. I don't think that Gen 2 elite specs should be better than Gen 1 elite specs. I think that they should be able to exist together by having different niches. That is incredibly important to me. All the complaints that came with Heart of Thorns about power creep, or not all of them, a lot of, especially from a PvE perspective, the power creep complaints, I kind of dismiss. But when it comes to this expansion, power creep's very much on my mind. Power creep between the 2 generations of elite specializations. All of that said, I'm a very optimistic and forgiving person, probably for the first 2 to 3 months of the next expansion. I like the idea, if things are going to be a little bit wonky with balance when big stuff comes into the game, which it will be, I would rather things be slightly overtuned than things be slightly undertuned. At least if things are slightly overtuned, they're exciting to play with and gimmicky, and yes, things will be broken for a while, but eventually they can be balanced correctly. If things go in and they're undertuned, it's kind of like the antitoxin spray, and it just gives you this general vibe that the devs don't know what the hell is exciting about the combat system and what the hell actually works. They look a lot more ignorant by undertuning things than overtuning things, and there's a lot more excitement in overtuning things than undertuning them. So for the first couple of months, like I say, I'll be kind of forgiving, but if the majority of Path of Fire and Forevermore and Guild Wars 2, the Gen 2 ones are power creeped, I think that's a problem, and I will be very upset about that, so we'll see what they do. Joseph asks, any thoughts on how the raid or world versus world meta will change? Neither of these I'm too confident on predicting because Guild Wars 2 is an incredibly complicated and unwieldy game. I'd never presume to know that much. However, I will say, World vs. World, if you hate the boons and so forth, I think you'll very much like the next expansion. There's a lot of boon rip on a lot of places, specifically with the Spellbreaker. When I saw the Spellbreaker Elite, which is just create a giant area where all boons disappear, I immediately thought World vs. World. I thought, yeah, Melee Chains in World vs. World, Spellbreaker will just stand in defiance of them and just everyone will... It's like a turbocharged null field, basically. And on top of that, so that, I don't really know how World vs. Worlders will take to, because that seems like that might bring us back to pirate ship, where people have to sort of strafe past one another using ranged stuff a lot. But, and people didn't really like that while we had pirate ship in Heart of Thorns. But then, beyond there, the Spellbreaker Elite also, not only does it rip all boons, but it also stops all projectiles as well. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. I don't know, it's going to be so hard to predict. It's hard to predict even if they were adding one new elite specialization into the game, let alone all of these at once. You know, like all that crazy, absurd stuff you see on the Deadeye, but then you realize, oh, well, hold on, Spellbreaker's got like 8 seconds of reveal, and yeah, the Deadeye can use its nuke and blink back, but then the Spellbreaker's got that tether that would instantly Scorpion Wire pull them back in. You know, seeing how these things interact with one another in PvP settings is going to be crazy. I've said it many times, I think the Balance team have got the worst jobs in terms of difficulty, I suppose, at that entire company. Absolutely nuts. Eduardo says, I love the heart rewards in Living World Season 3. Do you think that the new hearts will offer similar rewards like minis, backpacks, trinkets? Also, do you think about the hearts finally returning the expansion? I think it's great. I really do. It's interesting to remember that Heart of Thorns at launch didn't have hearts, and we hadn't been playing with hearts for ages. I like the Living World Season 3 hearts. I was talking very much on a stream recently about how much a good Living World Season 3 has done, giving karma a purpose again. And I know when we run out of a currency in a game, it doesn't feel too good to the fact that we've ran out of a currency, but actually having meaningful currencies in the game is super important to me, and karma was never a meaningful currency. I think if I go for this new Abaddon backpack in episode 6, I will be there. I will basically be karma drained, and I'll get this beautiful new expansion to play with all these interesting rewards, hopefully attached to hearts and attached to karma, that actually titillates me and makes me think, oh yeah, I want to go out and earn karma, and makes me more excited to complete events and meta events and finishing hearts every day. I think that stuff's all going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to being excited about getting karma again. I know that sounds weird, but I really am. And yeah, I like the kind of things that they offer. Specifically, what you should remember is the new expansion is going to have new stat types and potentially new runes and sigils, and those can all be put on the karma rewards as well. And I think that could all also be very, very, very awesome. Heart of Thorns, we obviously saw they did it with map currency, so how they strike that balance will be interesting. But the thought of going to a new map and having the you know, these new foods available, these new sigils available, these new stat combos available, that's all going to be really rewarding, I hope. And the final beautiful little thing they could add on top is do something like Aurora, but for the expansion. Maybe we get another legendary trinket in the expansion. I love the idea of getting a legendary amulet for totally mastering the expansion maps in the same way that Aurora asks us to master the Living World Season 3 maps. And then we get the legendary amulet with the expansion, and then, you know, maybe Season 4 we get another accessory and so on. Should be good. And they said in the AMA that they've got that planned out. Joe Akapui says, hey WP, why do you think we won't have Alolan-based characters like we did with Guild Wars 1? I made a new character with the whole Alolan look, new hair, face, but I'll still be an outsider and flying in from Tyria. It makes me quite sad. Well, there's always the question of, if you're doing that, there's like a sense of roleplay there, and I think if you're ever going to dive into roleplay in the game, you have to split the events of the story the devs are giving you away. Like, there's a lot of criticisms for Episode 6, a lot of it's warranted. Some of the unwarranted criticism, I think, is when people talk about the Shining Blade and, oh, my character wouldn't fit this from their RP perspectives. And I think in those situations, you do kind of have to make that disconnect. However, the idea of why don't we get basically new character generation and new personal story and get to re-roll a character, I think this is actually a good idea for Guild Wars 2, because it's very important for an expansion to have something like that, like a new race or a new class, and if the best they can do is an existing race just with some new skins and things on it, but that opportunity to level again in a new environment, I think is important. But really, to get to the nub of this discussion would take a long time, and probably a lot of people don't care anymore. But one of the entire reasons Guild Wars 2 exists at all is because the devs hated doing this in Guild Wars 1. They hated doing the campaign thing where they had to rebuild an entire set of new tutorial stuff that was getting more bloated each time. And you had to do all these new leveling things that a lot of people just weren't caring for anymore because a lot of them were veteran players. They didn't like doing that again and again and again. And so they wanted to go to an MMO that was listed as one of the main reasons that Guild Wars 2 even exists. And so the idea that they would do that format now in GW2 just because the lore matches up is kind of crazy. And it's funny to me that so many of us have forgotten about those early reasons for the sequel existing at all. Woogly Boogly says, what are your biggest, most realistic fears regarding this new expansion? I mean, this one, I don't know about the success of the expansion. What is the greatest risk in general for the majority of the player base? But for me, my biggest and probably realistic fear is the quality of the story, the length of the story, the meat to the story, all of that. If we get another four-act situation like Heart of Thorns did, and all the acts are kind of the same, and it's, you know, these sudden tangents we go off on and things aren't properly explained. If the expansion storytelling is the same as Living World Season 3's generally was, I think I'll come away fairly disappointed. I want more, and I'm really, really scared that it's going to be exactly the same as Heart of Thorns felt. That is my biggest, most realistic fear for the new expansion. Fingers crossed, right, guys? Purge Jim says, hey WP, do you think the gods will stop Balthazar or us? And if the gods, then will they be back Interior for good or not? There are many different ways this could go. We're kind of in story speculation territory here, which we've got, you know, 2 months to do. So I won't go too crazy, but I think initial impressions, I think one of the most epic climaxes for this expansion actually has nothing to do with Palawa Joko or Kralkatorrik. It could literally be returning to the ruins of Mora and the entrance to Torment, where Abaddon was cast down once upon a time, and the gods, it was the 5 gods against Abaddon, and essentially returning to that place with the gods united against Balthazar or something like that, and it's kind of like history repeating itself or something. Maybe cheesy, maybe cliche, some of you guys think, but I think with the correct implementation, that could be a really cool finale, and who knows what kind of cliffhanger or situation we could be in as that ends. Crazy stuff could happen with Kralkatorrik as well, definitely. The Mobot asks, did they say anything about increasing the population cap since these maps are so much bigger and more spread out? And also asks, do you get knocked off your mount or otherwise slowed down when you get hit and put into combat? No, you can get hit while you're on your mount and you won't get put into combat. You will get put into combat, sorry, but you won't get kicked off the mount. As for whether being in combat slows your mount's movement speed, that's an awesome question. I can't remember ever feeling like that happened, and I feel like from a design perspective, it might be cool to not have that happen, but I don't know for sure. And the other question I just want to raise, because I think it's really cool, I do not know the answer to this, but increasing the population cap since these maps are so much bigger and spread out is a really interesting idea. It's a good point that you're raising there. The thing is with the big maps, it's kind of deceptive in what it actually means, because bigger maps that you move faster through basically will feel the same speed, the same as the old ones, right? And when we talk about like population and how populated a game feels, if everyone's moving faster, then even if it is the same number of players and they're more spread out, if everyone's moving faster because they're on mounts, your frequency of encountering other people in the world could be just as high as it always was, and they don't have to change the population cap anyway. In a lot of ways, the fact that the maps are bigger isn't a selling point. It's a necessary thing that has to be done for the real selling point, which is mounts. And I mean, in some perspectives, the bigger maps is cool just in their own right, just the sense of scale and the environments, and if you're doing non-mounted travel and stuff like that. I don't know whether there'll be more players. I doubt there'll be more players. The new Elite specs is just more chance for more lag and stuff like that, and I doubt for what it's worth we'll ever really get a world boss where we're all stood together again in a really tightly packed spot like, say, the Shatterer or Jormag. I think we'll always be spread out Dragon Stand style or Gerent style or Auric Basin style. My guess is, and we'll see if I'm wrong one day, 150 player man cap and about around there. Very weird question from Zach Nightingale. Would you rather there be a new class in PoF or a new race in PoF? Either would start at level 80 and skip the personal story and start in the first instance of PoF. Well, absolutely, without a doubt, a new race. No way is it ever going to be smart for the devs to ever put a new class into Guild Wars 2. It exponentially bloats the amount of work they have to put into new elite specializations every generation. Oh, we have to make 10 new elite specializations and a new class. Now we have to make 11 and a new class. Now we have to make 12 and a new class. That is not sustainable. It won't work out. Have the 9 classes that we've got and let the elite specializations do the rest. You've seen with the Weaver how deeply they can change things and how many new skills they can add. There is no need, nor is there any sense in adding a new class to Guild Wars 2 ever. So my only recourse is to say a new race. But then you say, oh, they'd start level 80 and they'd skip the personal story. In which case, you're boiling this inclusion of a new race down to a purely cosmetic thing, which is fairly arbitrary. The true strength of adding a new race in an expansion is the ability for people outside of the community to see an in for themselves and say, oh yeah, I can go in, I can re-level, I can have new people to play with because there's a new race to experience. That's the true strength of a new race. And by saying they're just going to skip all of that and start level 80, kind of makes the whole endeavor feel a bit pointless to me. That would be a terrible learning curve for any new player and not ideal at all. Mike Pedalino has some great questions about Scourge. How different does the Necro traits that affect Shroud affect Scourge since there's no Shroud? What skills correspond to what abilities from Death Shroud? I don't know the specifics on this. I can tell you, though, from having watched the game through the Heart of Thorns era, that the devs were very careful about this, and they said that this would always be something they'd be mindful of. And if you think that the Scourge is in a weird position, the Soul Beast is in an even crazier one. Like, so much of Ranger, not just traits, but skills and things, affected their pet before. For the Scourge, I'm super excited about a lot of things. Imagine summoning 3 little totems and then popping your F4, which would then theoretically trigger transfusion, which would mean your totems suck bodies to them, res the bodies, heal your allies. It's going to be really, really crazy to see how they work that stuff out. I'm particularly excited about the transfusion dynamic because I did a Reaper transfusion build before, and it'd be nice to sort of go further with that. Next question I'm picking for a twin purpose. So Nathan says, I know that ArenaNet introduced mounts because of how huge the maps are going to be, but will there be a reasonable amount of waypoints on each map? And then Rafty responds by saying, in the video, it looks like there's 3 on the map WP is playing. So reason number 1 I'm addressing this is because everyone's asking about waypoints. Everyone. Listen, as far as I could tell from the demo, waypoints felt just about the same as with Heart of Thorns. They're bigger maps, but you're moving faster on your mount, and the waypoint density or necessity to have them felt about the same as I would always have expected. People are really honing in on the waypoint thing. Waypoints are not really that important when it comes to mount design. Mount design, really think about it like the Masteries. Think about it like gliding and leyline gliding and New Hawk Wallows. It's not about their interaction with waypoints so much, and I don't think that dynamic in the gameplay is going to change too much. But the other reason I've picked this question is because of Rafty's response. Rafty says, in the video, it looks like there's 3 on the map WP is playing. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the screen grab you're getting, but if you're talking about 3 waypoints in the area I had unfogged, the demo area, guys, is a small part of the entirety of the first map. I didn't get the entire first map. We get a bit of the first map, and there is much more to explore. And if you guys think that the demo was the whole first map, you're sorely mistaken. These maps are way, way, way bigger than what you were seeing I was roaming around in. They, you know, compared to the full size of the map, the boundaries were fairly restrictive. So if there were 3 waypoints in just the demo area, then yeah, I would not worry about there being too few waypoints. They will be plentiful. Michael Tone, more mount stuff. There's a lot of questions about mounts. It's fair. Michael Tone says, how do you switch between mounts? Can you only have one selected at once, or is it like switching between attunements on an Ellie? Yeah, you only have one at once. Basically, you have weapon swap now on the left of your skill bar, and on the right of your skill bar, you have a new mount button. There are 3 new keybinds. One of them is get on mount, right? But if you left click that button, then you'll get on the mount, or dismount the mount, depending on what mode you're already in. But if you right click that button, it will pull up a little context menu, and from that context menu, you will have a list of mounts you can select. And so think of it a lot like swapping a utility skill or an elite skill. You know, you right click and a little menu comes up with some other options. It's the same with the mounts. The styling is a little bit different, but that's the way it works. And I suppose because of the way they've done the UI there, that can suggest to us that there'll only be an upper limit on the amount of mounts that will ever come in the game. Maybe top 6 or 7. But definitely only 4 for the expansion and possibly a 5th on Living World Season 4. Who knows where they'll go from there. The rest of it will be skins, which is a whole different discussion. But that's the way that new button works. It's left click, right click, and that's how you do it. Fresh Prince of Chinatown says, what are the little number on the top right of some of your skills in this video? Seems to be mainly on Axe 3. This is just an example of getting thrust onto a new client with no keybinds and stuff. That's my Axe 3. That's a keybind that I was set up weirdly as I was rushing through the options to be able to provide you content. Don't pay any attention to it. That is not the ammunition mechanic that you now see on Kick. I saw some people speculating about that on my footage. That would be really cool, by the way. I think throw axe with an ammo mechanic works awesomely, and I'm actually really inspired by that, but that is not a thing in the game. Niloot, still on mount, says, I'm wondering about the movement speed of the new mounts, especially in the core maps. Wouldn't it be faster to just use the Executioner axe instead? From what I've seen so far, the mounts don't appear to be that fast, which is a bit disappointing. I think the mounts look slower than they actually are because they're very big. Like, you have to understand this about games. Think about when you're playing a very small Asura versus a very large Norn. The Norn feels really slow, even though it's moving at the same speed as the Asura, who feels like they're zipping along. And you can be a big character on a big mount, and you still don't feel slow. If that's happening, which it was when I was playing the demo, you know you're going very fast. There's also a matter of perspective as you travel around, because now the draw distance is further out, so just kind of things are a little bit off, right? That's why I couldn't quite tell if I was moving 33% faster or even as high as 50 or 60% faster. I just don't know. What I can tell you is you'll really feel that speed up when you're in the core maps. I reckon you'd be on pace with an Executioner's Axe while running around a Raptor, definitely, especially if that Raptor is jumping. The jump ability on it moves you even quicker, as you can see in the races. And also, what you're talking about here with the Executioner Axe, you know, that's a fiddly, annoying, special item required technique that very few people in the community do. Even if the Executioner Axe is faster, I really don't think that's too much of a detriment to the idea of mounts. Mounts are a big speed up, and, you know, if you can play a snake-dodging daredevil and win a race by using lots of infiltrators, arrows, and shadow steps and stuff, then fair play to you, but I think that the convenience you get from the mounts, the movement speed is a absolutely working part of their design, and I have no problems there. Tuesday Reference is a great point. Do you think that human characters who chose the Lost Sister story and then chose Alolan will get any kind of flavor text or something of the sort anywhere, or is it a little too far-fetched? I think that if the absolute legends who did the story in the Lake Doric patch, which had all kinds of references to your past, such as dungeons you did and even your profession, if those guys had been working on the expansion story, I'd say I hope that they've done that, and that'll be really cool. But those guys weren't working on the expansion. I just hope that the expansion team learned from the successes of that release, as clearly the episode 6 guys didn't. I was wondering this myself, similar thing, but I was actually playing a Balthazar blessed human, and you know, the expansion's got so much about Balthazar. Are we gonna get anything there? Even just for being human, are we gonna get anything? Remember, with Heart of Thorns, you actually got a reasonable difference if you were playing a Sylvari. You had like that moment where you went into PvP mode and you were getting stunned and you were seeing things that other races weren't. That was really nice. That was good detail that Sylvari players got. So will human players get a bit of extra detail? Will Char players, when we get to branded regions, get extra detail? I really think that the game needs to be doing a lot of this, and some of the biggest disappointments with the story is when they don't do it. Now, what you're asking for is for a human who picks a specific branch and then a branch within that branch. This is one of the like deepest branches within branches that actually exists in the game. Usually the devs were very scared about doing that, but they did this Elonan Canthan thing, I think because it was one of their earliest ideas and they'd mentioned it in early demos and they eventually paid off on it. But this is a branch and a branch and a branch. Will they pay off on that? Well, they'll get my respect if they do. Damien says, what about the new guild hall? Did the devs specify if we're going to get all the existing upgrades once we claim it? That would be lame. I agree with you, that would be lame. I think they did actually say that, I'm afraid. I'm pretty sure that did come up, maybe in the Q&A. I can't quite source it. I could be wrong on this one, but I think, yeah, you do just get it instantly. Let's face it, for the majority of the player base, they're going to love that. However, for me, I might open a new branch of Spud. I haven't talked to the Games Masters about this, but I might open a new branch of Spud just so that we can see what it's like to build up that new hall and get all of that juicy new NPC dialogue and fun flavor and stuff that will be so rare and so few other people will ever have experience. I think that could be really cool. So even if they do the lame route, I might be able to do something fun out of it anyway, just because it will be such weird content in the end. Zekstock says, hi WP, are there any movement speed differences when using a mount to justify using them in core Tyria, or are they only going to be used for their jump/dashes and such? From the footage, they don't seem to be much faster than just walking normally. Well, we already talked about them walking faster. I think we already explained that well enough. But yeah, I can imagine a lot of cool places. It depends how heavily they restrict using them in jumping puzzles and stuff. One thing I was really excited about that occurred to me just the other day was Draconis Mons. We have this idea of boiling water. You can swim in it, but it does lots of damage to you and you can't really exist in that boiling water. I think, number one, we'll probably see that mechanic return somewhere in the expansion for using the skimmer over. And number two, that means someone who's been to Draconis Mons and now gets a mount in the expansion can return to Draconis Mons riding the skimmer to skip across those boiling seas and, you know, get to the big bosses there without having to glide and all that kind of stuff. And that could be really fun as well. In fact, think about exploring Bloodtide Coast on the skimmer. The skimmer's probably my favorite mount. People have been asking me that a lot as well. The skimmer, to right now, pre-release, I think the skimmer's my favorite mount. That guy looks awesome. Terrafast says, WP, a little speculation, please. Do you found mount skins likely? Would you prefer them to release 4 skins at once with a single theme, like Mad King versions of all the mounts, or single skins with no worry to a unifying theme, or if they even have options? Great question. I hadn't even considered that they could do, like, bulk batches like that. No, I think they should just do individual skins. Don't force them to, you know, make a version of every skin for every mount. Just really dive into what's special about each mount and do a skin there. I think that mounts that drop from Black Lion chests, similar to how the Elemental Sword did, are very likely to happen. And I think ArenaNet's going to finally start earning a lot of money on this game, specifically by doing that. I think that stuff's going to happen. That's only speculation. Nothing coming from a dev there, as I say, any of that. But what's most interesting to me with this topic is where we will see the skins go. Like, how comprehensive can these skins be? You know, I think of games like League, where you've got regular skins and then you have really expensive skins that proper change the models and tons of attack animations and stuff. They could do the similar stuff with mount skins, right? There can be more basic skins that are a little bit like, you know, more elaborate dyes, essentially, and maybe adding new dye channels to mounts. And then they could sell extra crazy mounts, skins that basically change the entire model, change your raptor into a Saurian of some kind, right? And all sorts like that. I think where they go with that could mean crazy monetization options for this MMO. Second to last, we have Vestes, who says, why do you feel they didn't add the Dervish to this? I don't see why the people of Alona would give up the Dervish class and not introduce it to us. So why do you feel the devs didn't add it for us, even if they named it something different like Reaper, such as they did with Assassin/Thief? Yeah, like, and the Paragon, if people don't know, there is a huge amount of Paragon, like deliberate, specific lore Paragon influence in the Spellbreaker. The idea is, after the Sun Spears and so forth were wiped out, members of that orders, Paragons included, kind of formed the Spellbreakers, and that's sort of where that goes. But we haven't really seen much about the Dervish. I'm sure there will be Dervish lore in the expansion, but they could warp it in any way they like. The expansion probably won't take us further south than Vabi. I'm expecting the border to be somewhere around the Fortress of Jahai. Not that I've seen that, but that's where I think it will probably be. And that leaves the region of Corner and Istan and all the areas around that as well, for still thriving Alona-based atmospheres and environments where maybe we can be introduced to the Dervish. Maybe these areas, especially Istan, have clung on to the Dervish a lot more. So there's all those opportunities. By the way, I just want to point out, in terms of region and exploration for after the expansion's out and where Season 4 could go, that's incredibly exciting. Our Season 3 speculation about where a new map is like, oh, where are they going to fill in a blank? Are we going to go north of the bridge? Are we going to finally go to the Fire Island Chain? Little things like that. When this next expansion's out, we are probably going to be saying, oh my god, are we going to go to Corner next? Are we going to go to these huge places filled with civilization and culture and beautiful environment? It's going to be really interesting. The places that Season 4 could go is going to be wild, and that's just in about 4 months. All right, and so the last question as well. I tried to get through so many, and I've barely even affected the scroll bar, guys. Keep them coming. If I haven't answered your question, please feel free to just drop it again on this episode you're watching here. But so, the last one here, Dang Sun, has a great question I don't know the answer to, but I just want you all to think about it and be excited about it. Do you know if the mounts will get footfalls from your respective legendaries? I love footfalls from my legendaries and would love for that to transfer from mounts somehow. Great idea. I don't know. My suspicion is no, that won't happen. And I actually don't know how much I'd like that. If my really cool raptor footprints in the sand just changed into, you know, generic Meteorologicus lightning bolts, I think that would kind of kill the flavor. If they did it, I'd want it to be a mount version, but now maybe that's asking too much work of them. So perhaps they won't, and instead it will be a perk of future legendary accessories and stuff. That legendary accessories can now start affecting footfalls of mounts and things, instead of that all being bound to your weapons. So you get one kind of footfall while you're fighting in combat, then the combat ends, you get on your mount and you've got a new footfall because of a different legendary you've got equipped, and so on and so on and so on. Maybe that would be a nice thing to do. But yeah, man, lots of technical questions about mounts. If you guys have got more, keep them coming at me, and I'll see you for another Q&A tomorrow, just as I promised.